It's strange how sometimes the most terrifying things don't happen at night, but during the quiet, normal moments of your life. For me, it wasn't a strange noise that woke me up or a shadow at the corner of my eye that sent a shiver down my spine. It was a room, a single, unassuming room at the end of the hall that I wasn't supposed to see. I moved into the house on Harris Street almost a year ago. It was an old Victorian-style house with creaky floors and doors that never quite closed properly. The kind of house where you could almost hear the past breathing through the walls. It had a certain charm to it, though. The kind of place you could imagine living in for a long time, curling up in front of the fireplace and forgetting about the world outside. I wasn't alone in the house. I lived with my younger sister, Mia. She was the outgoing one, the bubbly one who seemed to have no fear of the world around her. We'd been through a lot together, having moved around from place to place after our parents passed away. And I guess you could say the house felt like a fresh start for us both, even if it was old and strange in places. The thing about this house was that it felt alive. You'd think I was being dramatic, but that's the only way I can describe it. The air inside felt heavy, like the house was breathing, like it had a presence that was always just behind you. At first, I thought I was just adjusting to the new space, but after a few days, I started to notice things I couldn't explain. I kept hearing footsteps in the hallways at night, but when I went to investigate, there was no one there, just the same old, dark, empty hall. The feeling of being watched, that heavy, oppressive sense of something lingering just out of sight, was constant. Every time I turned around, I felt like there was someone standing behind me, but when I looked, nothing was there. It wasn't until we found the room that things really started to spiral. One evening, Mia and I were sitting in the living room watching an old movie. I remember we were laughing at some cheesy line in the film when Mia suddenly stopped, her expression shifting from amusement to confusion. She stood up, looking toward the hallway. "Is that door always open?" she asked, pointing to the farthest door at the end of the hall. I looked. The door was slightly ajar, a narrow sliver of blackness visible through the gap. We'd never opened it, and I was sure it hadn't been opened before. It was one of those doors that didn't seem to have a lock or a doorknob, just a smooth wooden surface, its grain faded with age. I stood up to check it out, my curiosity getting the better of me. As I walked down the hall, I felt my heartbeat quicken. The house was too quiet now, too still. The air felt thick, and the shadows in the hallway seemed to stretch longer than usual. The door was further down, right at the end of the corridor where the hallway seemed to end, and where everything felt wrong. I reached for the door. It wasn't locked, but there was something strange about the way the handle turned, as if the door were fighting me. It was like it didn't want to open. But I finally managed to get it to budge, pushing the door open just a little bit. Behind it was another hallway, one that led down. I couldn't see the end of it. It stretched far beyond the darkness, a hallway that shouldn't have been there, as if the house itself had hidden it. My stomach churned as I looked down that narrow passage. "Mia, don't come in here," I called, my voice shaky. But Mia was already there, standing beside me, peering into the unknown. "Why is this here?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. I didn't have an answer, but I felt the weight of it, the danger lurking just beyond the threshold. We decided to leave it alone, but the door stayed open. The hallway beckoned, its darkness inviting us to step closer, to cross into it. It was like the house had opened its mouth, and we had seen something we weren't supposed to see. For the next few days we stayed away from it, but the feeling never left. That heavy presence, that feeling of something waiting in the dark, pressing down on us, was unbearable, and that's when the dreams started. I remember the first night it happened. I had been asleep for only a few hours when I woke up suddenly drenched in sweat. The dreams had felt too real, too vivid. I dreamed of that hallway, the one behind the door, only in my dream. I was walking down it. The walls were closing in on me. I felt something chasing me. There was a noise low and guttural, like the air itself was being sucked into a void. And then, at the end of the hall, I saw something standing in the darkness. A figure, tall, shadowy, with no face. It didn't speak, didn't move, but I could feel it watching me, waiting. I shot up in bed, gasping for breath, my heart pounding in my chest. The next day, I could tell Mia was having the same dreams. She was pale, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. She didn't need to say anything. I could feel it too. Something was wrong. Something was in the house, in that room at the end of the hall. We avoided it, for a while at least. But the house had other plans. One afternoon, I came home from work and found Mia missing. I wasn't alarmed at first. She was probably out, visiting friends or doing something, I thought. But as I wandered through the house, checking her usual spots, I started to feel a knot in my stomach. I couldn't find her anywhere. That's when I heard it. A soft scraping sound like nails against wood. It was coming from down the hall. My breath caught in my throat. It was unmistakable. The noise was coming from that door. I approached it cautiously, my hand shaking as I reached for the handle. The door opened with the same reluctant creak it always had, revealing the narrow hallway beyond. But this time, something had changed. At the end of the hall, I could see Mia standing in the dark, her back to me, motionless. Her hair hung limp, and her shoulders were slumped, as though something weighed heavily on her. "Mia," I whispered, my voice barely a breath. She didn't move. She didn't answer. I stepped closer, and that's when I saw the shadow standing beside her, towering over her. It wasn't her reflection. It wasn't a figment of my imagination. It was real. The figure reached out, its hands grabbing Mia's shoulders, and that's when I saw it, its face. A face made of shifting shadows, a mouth that stretched too wide, filled with too many teeth. I tried to scream, but the sound caught in my throat, frozen by the sheer terror of it. Before I could move, the darkness swallowed her whole. And then the hallway was silent. I never saw Mia again. The door at the end of the hall is always open now, and sometimes, late at night, I hear whispers. I don't dare go near it. The hallway is waiting for me. It's waiting for anyone foolish enough to look.